This has been a fascinating exercise in travel because yesterday we got here and somewhere between leaving Zurich and going to Istanbul and coming here, Kimmy and I lost complete track of what day it was. And the only relationship we had to time was what our phones said, but no idea really where the rest of the world was. So we got to keep working on our global time clocks on our phones, which now we have about 12 different cities on there so we can keep track of it. This is going to be an interesting live. I got Craig Wright on here. I got Dennis Wainwright on here. And what I'm going to talk about this morning is a controversial subject for sure. And I didn't ask anybody. I didn't ask Kimmy. I didn't ask my team. Is it a good idea if I talk about senseless mass shootings in America on my live? But you know, it's the only thing that's been on my mind since yesterday. And so I just didn't see the point in talking about anything else. So what I want to talk about this morning is senselessness, if that's even a word. You know, I guess 18 kids were killed in Parkland High School yesterday, 5 in the hospital, but fortunately, according to the news, they're going to survive. And, you know, what I got to thinking about was how this has become so common in the United States, especially that we've become numb to it. And what else have we become numb to in our world, such that we don't take a stand for it anymore? And, you know, I started thinking about the Las Vegas shooting, and, you know, I'm sure everybody listening to this can remember, you know, how horrified we were and how present we were to that situation, which was just a few months ago. 58 people killed, 151 injured from a mass shooting. So I did a little research this morning just to try to bring context to what's going on in our world and how we tolerate it, and you know, what position we're on. And I'm not, this live is not about taking a position on gun control, but I want to share with you some stats that I found on Google, and I'm not claiming they're all true. And of course, there's perspectives on all of this. I grew up a hunter. I have guns. I've always had guns. You know, it's cultural where I grew up, at least in a certain group of people. We grew up hunting, and we grew up target practice, and, you know, guns were a rite of passage as a kid. And, you know, I suppose as we grew older, you know, the more powerful and interesting and fascinating the gun was, the better. I've actually collected shotguns my whole life. I have like 25 or 30 of them. And, you know, I might shoot one once a year for a half an hour for sport, shooting clays. I don't shoot animals anymore. That's just my personal choice. But, you know, here's some things in perspective that I just thought maybe we could all think about, and some questions we could ask ourselves, like what we tend to tolerate, we tend to endorse in our society, and, you know, whether it's people in your life that you tolerate how they treat you. We tend to train people how to behave around us based on what we tolerate. And, you know, I was just coaching somebody the other day about, you know, I'm being mistreated, I'm being mistreated, I'm being mistreated. And so the question I asked them is, well, take a look at how you've responded to that mistreatment. Like, what people tend to do is when they're mistreated, they also tend to tolerate it oftentimes. And the idea of responding powerfully, and I don't mean out of anger and resentment, I don't mean with a childish response, I mean with an adult powerful response. What we tolerate in our life and the behavior that we tolerate, we actually teach people to perpetuate. And the word that keeps coming to mind to me around these mass shootings is senselessness. They are senseless shootings. And, you know, here's some interesting stats. Since 1966, some of you might remember the tower shootings in 1966 in San Antonio. I think something like 37 people were killed. And it's the first time in my life I remember anything like this. I remember Walter Cronkite, I think, covering it, a famous newscaster back in the day. And all of us were horrified, I think, because it's the first time that we ever experienced that. And I read an article, I'll post the link to it in the comments so you can read it too, in the Washington Post about the history of mass shootings. And how they're defined in this article is not domestic disputes, not shootings related to gang activities or crime, but what we might consider senseless shootings, where somebody that we would not expect takes it upon themselves to see how many people in a public setting they can take out. And so here's some interesting statistics from that article. Since the San Antonio shooting in 1966, there's been 150 what are called senseless mass killings, 1,077 people killed, 150 different shooters, and 298 guns used. And, you know, most of the shootings were actually done with pistols, not with AR-15s like at Parkland High, not with assault rifles, but still, you know, magazines, clips that would hold, 15 rounds at a time. And, when you get an assault rifle involved and you get multiple clips, I mean, somebody could have hundreds, if not thousands of rounds of ammunition at their easy disposal. So, one of the questions I asked about this is the numbness that we get to it. So, here's an interesting statistic. There's been just in 2018, so a little over 2 months, there's been 18 school shootings in the United States. 18. And we probably don't even know about most of them, probably unless unless more than 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 people are killed, they don't even really make the news anymore because they just become commonplace. And so we become senseless to them, like we're no longer outraged by them. We tolerate them. And I'm not proposing here answers to this. I don't have the answers to it. Some people say, well, it's gun control. Let's control the guns. Here's an interesting statistic. There's been 298 guns used in what are called these mass senseless killings since 1966. 298 guns. And there's 300 million guns in the United States. And so I guess that begs the question, is it gun control? Does that solve it? Well, let's go down that path. Most of the guns used in these senseless mass shootings were not assault rifles. And yet, here's an interesting fact. I didn't remember, maybe I'd read it before. From 2004 to 2014, the selling of brand new assault rifles in the United States was against the law. You could buy a used one, but you couldn't buy a new one. From 2004 to 2014. In 2014, that ban was not reinstated. It was a 10-year ban, and Congress did not reinstate it. Since 2014, when the ban was lifted, the sale of assault rifles has skyrocketed. And, that's probably because of that sort of cultural thing, that if guns are not allowed, then of course everybody wants one. And so as soon as they are allowed, for fear that they might be disallowed sometime in the future, people tend to stock up on guns. So since 2014, you could buy a new assault rifle. So, a question that I think we all ought to just sit with is, what is the purpose for a United States citizen to own an assault rifle? Now, I think they're fascinating instruments, and technologically they're so far advanced, and culturally I understand the infatuation with an assault rifle. But what do we need one for? What does a citizen need an assault rifle for? You don't need it for hunting. You don't need it even for target practice. I suppose they're just interesting. They're fascinating. And culturally, if you were raised in that culture, you probably want one. You want the best gun you can get. And then, here's some more senseless for us. 47, 58, I can't remember the number, maybe 58 people killed in Las Vegas, and we were all horrified by that. And you remember the conversation around bump stocks? Bump stocks are this little device that you can put on a semi-automatic assault rifle that turn it into an automatic weapon. And remember all the conversation and all the political and the media attention around let's ban bump stocks so that at least a semi-automatic weapon cannot be made automatic. And I think probably a lot of people thought, well, of course, let's ban those. And you know that Congress still hasn't done that? And I guess a question for you is, when it comes to senselessness, how much has the Las Vegas shooting been on our minds since it happened? Like, how long did it stay on our mind before we went just back to our life and we forgot about it? And we forgot about, why it happened and how it happened. So, I'm not taking a position here that gun control is the answer. There's 150 people since 1966 nationwide that have taken upon themselves to resort to this way of expressing themselves. And so maybe we should be thinking about mental health and, how do people get to the place where that's the way they want to express themselves? Maybe it's video games. Maybe for the last 20 years, training our children that you win in a video game by how many people you can kill. I mean, we can't ignore that, folks. When kids are raised on that sort of edification, that sort of competition, that sort of mental development, then perhaps when they really get depressed, they really get angry, they're really looking to make a statement, that course occurs to them. And maybe it's the media that, draws attention to these. And so, there's a great theory out there that, people that want to one-up the last big media sensation, that's the vision that they create for themselves, is they want to be known as the one that took out the most people. And they only get that information from watching the news about the most previous senseless killing. So, there's a lot of questions around this, and I don't pretend to try to answer them here on this live this morning. The thing that I want us to think about, the thing that I'm thinking about, and I just encourage you to think about, is senselessness, and how, because we tolerate things, we just tend to manifest them in our lives. And maybe because we're tolerating the sale of bump stocks or assault weapons, or maybe because we don't even have a really good set of federal regulations on who can buy a gun and how they can buy a gun, maybe we tolerate this. Or maybe because, we think it's okay to raise our kids on video games. And I don't mean Pac-Man. I was raised on Pac-Man. I wasn't raised on Black Ops or whatever these games are that teach kids to see how many people they can kill on a video game. One of the things that I know about psychology is that the part of us that's powerful, the part of us that really rules our behavior, can't tell the difference between a real event and one vividly imagined. That's one of the secrets to success. We can train our mind and train our heart and train our psyche to do things and be somebody that we've never been before just by imagining ourselves in that place. So how does that play out when we're trained as kids to see how many people on a video game we can kill from the age of 5 or 6 or 7 or 10, or, we just keep playing these video games and we keep competing and we call ourselves a winner based on, how we rank in how many levels of people we've killed in a video game. These are things to think about. These are things to think about as a parent. Our good friends Adam and Vanessa Green are, about to have a newborn child. And I was chatting with Adam early this morning about, what a great opportunity to give life. And what a great opportunity Adam and Vanessa have to raise a child with a new awareness about, how the mind develops and how the heart develops. And, the Green's child is going to have an extraordinary opportunities that children that perhaps are depressed and, you know, the shooter in Parkland, his mom just died, and we don't have any idea like what this kid was going through and how depressed he was and how angry he was, and we don't know any of that. But we all as parents have extraordinary opportunities to not be senseless about what we allow ourselves to get bored with or tolerate, or what we allow our children to get bored with or tolerate, what we allow our children to be raised with. And we all have a responsibility, whether it's environmentally or in mental health or in things like, you know, the proliferation of firearms, to think about the future of our world, to think about the future of our country, to think about the future of our society, to think about the future of our children. These are just things to think about. You know, Kimmy and I laid in bed this morning and just imagined, what if that was Haley? What if that was Haley and Kimmy and I had the power to pass regulation to try to help prevent that from happening in the future? What would we do? And of course, when it's not your child, when it's 3,000 miles away, when within a week or two it's not at the top of the news, it becomes senseless, and when we tolerate it. And so that's just what I wanted us to think about today. I'm in this extraordinary place, the Maldives. Kimmy and I are a long ways from the trauma and of Parkland High School. And perhaps I'll do another live today that, celebrates the great place we are and what we're experiencing here. But I just wanted to have us all think about what's happening in the United States of America and how complicit we have been for the last, since 1966, in tolerating it, and what we might do in the future so that our children perhaps aren't living in a society where the graph just keeps going up every year. I mean, wow, I was just shocked. 18 school shootings already in 2018. And it's become commonplace. And I don't think that's good for our children. I don't think that's good for our future. So the question that every one of these lives, I am committed to posing a question. What are you tolerating? What are you tolerating in your life that makes things toxic for you going forward? What are you tolerating in your life that puts you at risk going forward? What are you tolerating in your life that perhaps does not contribute to the future of our society and our world? Maybe it's environmentally, maybe it's your children, maybe it's your own mental health. And by mental health, I don't mean that, you have a disease or that you need a psychiatrist. I just mean by mental health, a healthy mental state is somebody that's at peace, somebody that expresses love. And so people that are committing these mass shootings, they're a long way from that. And I guess, I'll end it with, be the change you want to see in the world. And what are you tolerating? And what could you be a stand for not tolerating anymore, either in your life or in our world? Thank you all for tuning in.